Good afternoon, Dr. Alan Christensen here with you. Welcome to another episode of Office Hours Live. All right, good to be with you here on this Monday afternoon. And this is going to be a fun one. We've got a lot of really good questions that were sent in, and I'll get many of those, and we'll get several of your live ones as well. Okay, so Office Hours Live. So our focuses, we'll talk a lot about food, metabolism, diet, weight loss. Those are big ones. All things hormone. That's the biggest overarching concept is hormone regulation. Hormones are like the bridge between lifestyle and health, and that's been my focus all along. And of course, thyroid disease. We'll go deep into that and treatments, considerations for it. And if you've been here before, you know what to expect. If you're new, welcome. Love to hear where you're from. Always curious about where people are tuning in from. We often see folks from many different parts of the world, and always happy to have you. So if you're coming on, you can also put in some questions. I'm with you guys on Instagram and on YouTube Live and on Facebook. And don't be afraid about details. That's the whole point. I want to give you information you wouldn't really find as much otherwise. All right, and I'm moving some stuff around so I can see what was sent in before. There we go. I can see what's happening on all different platforms now. All right, all good. Okay, so first one I wanted to share, there we go. This was sent in, and this was a really good one. We got someone from Dallas joining us, and many are jumping on now. Okay, California. Okay, one more window I can see too. There we go, now I can see all the windows. Question about Graves' disease coming in line. Here's some new ones about glucose. Yeah, I see this one a lot, Maritza. Thank you for asking that question again. I'll talk about that one. So one that was sent in before I wanted to lead off with was about, here it is. Bubba sent this one in, Bubba Freebird. Can someone's TSH temporarily rise into the 6 to 8 range, but still not be truly hypothyroid and or require medication? Like if someone's fasting or sick or some particular condition? Or does an elevated TSH always mean the thyroid needs support? So Bubba, this is a really, really good question. And the best answer for this is one that requires a little nuance and some distinction. So the TSH, if you're newer around in the thyroid world, this is the pituitary telling your thyroid to work, and it's backward. So the more your thyroid is underactive, the higher this number goes. And if it's overactive, it goes low. So what Bubba's talking about, a TSH rising, means the thyroid is slowing down. Now, when that happens, that can cause a ton of symptoms. The weight gain, the fatigue, you name it, lots of stuff, the hair loss, menstrual changes. And logically, you would think that if hypothyroidism caused a high TSH, then pushing the TSH down by giving hormones would take care of those problems. That would make so much sense. But in many cases, the one doesn't follow from the other. So yeah, Bubba, it can rise like that, and it's significant, and it can be a thing causing symptoms. And it doesn't even mean the thyroid needs help in some way, but it doesn't always mean that medication will help. So what you're talking about, Bubba, is generally what's called subclinical hypothyroidism. And here's a little image that talks about that. If you're with me on YouTube or Facebook, you'll see these images. On Instagram, they won't show up. But this is showing from a large study by the British Medical Journal. And it's looking at those who have elevated TSH, but their T4 hasn't dropped. And by elevated TSH, that means somewhere as high as even 19. So 20 and above, things are different, but as high as 19. And by the T4 dropping, I don't mean like low normal or not in the higher third. I mean like way below range. When it's way below range, it's different. But Bubba, in your case, if your TSH was 6 to 8, but your T4 was not way below range, then this would be called subclinical disease. And the data is totally strong that subclinical disease can cause a poor quality of life. It can cause a lot of thyroid symptoms like fatigue or tiredness or depression. It can cause cognitive dysfunction. It can raise the risk of mortality and cause heart disease and cause these side effects. It can cause a lot of problems, no debate about that. But does medication help? And the evidence now is totally clear that it helps none of those things. That if you medicate someone like that, you don't improve their quality of life. You don't make them less tired. You don't help them lose weight. You don't cut their risk of cardiovascular disease. Those things don't get better. So yeah, the higher TSH does mean your thyroid could use some support. It does mean it's not working ideally, but it doesn't mean you have to go on medications. And more often than not, the medications aren't helpful in the ways that one would expect. So what can you do? Well, we've had many clinical trials now showing that dietary change can reverse thyroid disease for the majority of people. And by majority, I should say reverse or improve. Yeah, reverse or improve for somewhere between 90 to 95% of people. They can get totally better or mostly better by diet therapy only. And when I wrote the last book, I was considering everything out there for diet therapy. I'm like, whatever we have for good evidence about diet being useful, how much can it help and what types help? And I saw all these clinical trials showing that by regulating iodine, the disease gets better for nearly everyone. So, yeah, the thyroid reset diet was my last effort on that. And we see this work. We see people get better from that approach. Okay, more jumping in from all over. A few more questions were sent in advance. I've got these here queued up, and I'll weave these in through some of the ones coming in live as well, so we can keep it interactive. I saw some good ones coming in live. Here was someone who asked, and this is on Instagram. Hello, doctor. I have Graves' disease. Can my eyes return back like before? So yeah, so Graves' eye disease. This came in from someone on Instagram. This is kind of an odd thing. So Graves' eye disease, it's an autoimmune disease that's separate from Graves' disease. And it's not caused by extra thyroid hormone. It's a completely different disease, actually. It actually happens to some people with Hashimoto's as well. And some people get it without having thyroid disease, if you can believe it or not. But yeah, Graves' eye disease, it's autoimmunity where the tissue behind the eyes starts to build up and enlarge because of a heightened immune attack. And that pushes the eyes forward. In some cases, this can be threatening towards actual vision. It can be very serious. Some of those cases can require surgery. Some take acute medications to lower the swelling, but it does tie to the overall autoimmune process. Now, with Graves' treatment, there is a slight higher risk of Graves' eye disease for those that do radioablation versus those that do medication or dietary therapy or surgery even. So that is known. But it does correlate with the overall autoimmune response with Graves'. And the measurement of that is a thing called the thyroid stimulating immunoglobulin, TSI. So the higher that number is, the greater the risk is for onset of Graves' eye disease. So with Graves' disease, that's a good thing to track. Now, when that comes down, which it can for many, that cuts the risk of eye disease coming on. But when eye disease has been there for a while, if a lot of tissue has built up, that tissue may not go away. So there's the ongoing disease process, and there's the remnants of the disease process. So some people with Graves' eye disease, what they have is just the remnants of the disease process that's already passed. And so if someone's TSI is low, their thyroid has been well controlled for some time, but their eye protrusion has not changed, then that's a discussion to have with the team, because it may be some remnant compounds called lipofuscin that have built up behind the eye. And to some extent they can dissolve, but to some extent they cannot. So if a lot has built up, it may persist. And that can be a matter of surgery, or sometimes medication can reduce that. But yeah, the first thing, of course, is regulating the Graves itself, managing the hyperthyroidism, and managing the Graves autoimmunity. I'm going to share some links I've talked about before with that. And yeah, here's one of those. I'm going to get this up here for you guys. Okay, so here's a discussion about Graves, the role that diet can play with that, and other natural approaches that help, and at what place is conventional care needed. But this will talk through that in some good detail for people. I'll get this link up in the other platform as well. Okay, there we go. Yeah. So yeah, good one. Another that was sent in before. Let me get this one up here real quick. This is a fascinating one. This was about the idea of cancer, like more cancer risk for those using levothyroxine. So Karen asked about that. Uh, Now, it's interesting. There's levothyroxine is the most common medication for treating thyroid disease, and it's the most common treatment overall for thyroid disease. Even though, like we talked about, many don't benefit from medication, this is the mainstay of treatment still. So, does levothyroxine raise the risk of cancer? It might. There was a large study done in Korea, and they tracked about 1 million people, and they had one group that was on thyroid medication and one group that was not. And these groups were matched so meticulously otherwise. They had about the same rates of high blood pressure. Oh, someone saying that I'm not showing up on Facebook. Let me pause for a minute and just see if I've got to adjust that. Okay. Yep, that one's not connecting for some reason. Let me take a quick look. I'm going to pause the stream. My apologies. Thank you for letting me know that. I'm going to pause for 1 second and I will come right back on that.